There's this billion-dollar tug-of-war happening in the boardrooms. As of 2026, the research shows that 87% of companies have increased AI budgets, but only 14% have a clear owner in the C-suite. This is creating a lot of issues, a lot of questions. So the question we're tackling today is, who is the owner of AI in the enterprise?
In a couple of months, a shoe will drop that what's one company, one employee, someone who's sitting somewhere in the basement and just creating something on their own will absolutely unintentionally will spill some secrets, some data. It's already happening in small things, but we just didn't have like a big shoe drop.
The single biggest expense line in every single company right now around the world is token consumption and AI token cost. As usual, procurement feels like it's asleep at the wheel, right? Like the people who are monitoring consumption and usage are in tech, obviously, because they own the tool. But, procurement should be all over the costs.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement. Today, I am with the three amigos again. I've got Natasha. We're getting to her from Atlanta. She looks like $1 million. We've got Zach. He looks like $100,000. And then there's me. I'm just, I don't know, hacking it up on the beaches of Hawaii. So nice shirt and swimsuit below, ready to run down to the beach, if only. Bright and early over here. All right, guys, we got a great topic. Last week, we got together and had like a coffee chat about AI like we always do. It seems like that's the topic of the day. And we got to this big question, who owns AI in the enterprise? This is not as easy as you might think, right? There's this billion-dollar tug-of-war happening in the boardrooms. There's actually some really interesting data out there. As of 2026, the research shows that 87% of companies have increased AI budgets, but only 14% have a clear owner in the C-suite. This is creating a lot of issues, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty. Those of us that are a layer or two below the C-suite, sitting around, assigning budget and not having an owner, trying to figure out what to do. We're all excited and anxious and everything else. So the question we're tackling today is, who is the owner of AI in the enterprise? Which of you want to take a crack at putting the red pill up, and then we'll take the blue pill on the other side?
Look, I think everyone owns AI in the enterprise. Like AI is only as good as the people using AI and deploying AI, right? So I would start there. I just make it clear that it's very hard to sort of own AI, and I've heard of a lot of companies that are sort of setting up these AI chief of AI offices, and their jobs are to help kind of the rest of the business stand up pilots and, take the best ideas and funnel them. And I'm thinking you're not going to get AI to work that way, because, like ultimately, if you actually want real change to happen, it needs to come from the people who are doing the job today. They're best placed to understand how AI can help them. So that's my take. I think I'd start with
Zach, who should Chief AI report to?
Well, if there was a Chief AI officer, they should report into the CEO, because everyone else has got a different agenda. So CFO would probably want, financial returns and focus on that angle. CTO will be all about the technology itself, not necessarily about the business strategy, et cetera. I mean, I'm speaking in broad terms here. But the CEO is the one who needs to set the AI strategy. So if you're going to set up an AI officer, a chief AI officer, then they should report to CEO.
Zach, I got to ask, what does AI even mean in that context, right? Like, I mean, I see organizations that have sort of a chief of transformation, or like there's a big strategy coming down the pipe, and so the CEO assigns the czar or the owner or somebody to own, to have this thing. But it strikes me that AI is it efficiency? Is it transformation? Is that a long-term play that that it's this office of the CEO? Like, what are you really talking about there when you're saying, hey, there's somebody reporting to the CEO that owns AI, but it's not technology related, and what does it
Yeah,
look
well,
like?
that's the thing. It's not efficiency, right? I mean, I mean, it can be used for efficiency, but it can be used for all kinds of things. It can be used for creativity. It could be used for, many other kind of applications, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. But that's precisely the point, is everyone needs to use it. So, can it really be owned and the use case is sort of decided by and governed by a chief AI office? No, I think what you can do is you can set up like an investment fund. So here's a good idea, like an investment pot where people apply for funding with their projects, but really it needs to be open to the whole company, right? It needs to be open to people on the ground who are actually doing the work to go propose a use case, apply for funding in that way. But the less centralized it is, the better. I say every budget holder should have a budget for AI, and they should be measured on not just that they are using it, but how well they're using it.
I don't know. I don't know what I think about all that. My brain's going a million different directions. Natasha, are you all in with Zach, or you got a different perspective?
No, and I'm like I'm falling away from Zach yet again, and because I think that if it's completely decentralized, then how you're gonna drive compliance? How can you make sure that your guys in the distribution centers somewhere in the field or in the plant will not create their own purchase orders? How what if some parts of organizations will fall completely behind and you rely on them, and if your organization is heavy consumer of AI, then you're already operating at a different speed. You're already sending different documents. You're processing emails differently. Like your meetings are scheduled differently. And if someone is falling massively behind, then they will be out of sync with the entire enterprise. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of decentralization. I am a fan of centralized strategy and autonomous implementation, but under some set of rules and guidance. I'm also thinking that, it's like I cannot call help desk and say, hey guys, can you please teach me how to use Excel? So I agree with you that it's our individual responsibility to learn it, because as there's no help desk to teach me how to use Excel, that equally there should not be a help desk teaching me how to use AI. But I don't see AI just as technology. I view AI as a process, and I view AI as a great enabler of the strategy that's been created by a human mind, and it helps and it empowers us to implement it faster, better, and all of that. So from that perspective, I think that I'm more fan of centralization. But I'm going to throw that in the absence of chief AI officer, if the company has chief transformation officer, then it should fall under their responsibility, or chief strategy officer. But if there's no chief strategy and no chief transformation, then I would say it absolutely has to go under CPO.
I think that's reasonable, Natasha. I'm just thinking out loud here, but the best people who are using AI the best that I know are honestly not using it on their corporate machines. Like, they outside of work, they're subscribing to all these tools. They're testing the boundaries. They're kind of learning it on their own, and it takes on like this kind of passion project type of thing. And just unfortunately, not everyone's got that kind of passion. And I do feel that if companies don't give their employees, I don't want to say free reign. Data security and control is important from that point of view. You're absolutely right about that. But give them the best tools. Give them the frontier models. Let them, get tools that are really working in their industry as quickly as possible into the business, in a streamlined fashion. That's how you're going to take the whole organization with you. the risk is, some people get ahead of others in the business, and you don't want people falling behind. And already there's some fear around AI and what AI can do. And yeah, I'm seeing like the people pulling ahead are having to do it outside of their corporate environment. And that's really my main concern.
Well, Zach, I think I see the same thing, by the way, and you're a great example of that, right? Every time we talk to you, you've got some garage project working on some, and I love that it's procurement focused, right? You're actually experimenting and trying things that relate to your core job, but you're kind of doing it in your garage so you have more latitude. But I think, if you go back to most procurement organizations and ask them how they're using AI, they'll talk about generative AI. Maybe they'll talk about a little bit of Copilot, or like call it the early flavors or generations of what we're now talking about with like agentic AI. I mean, they're doing it, but at an enterprise level, they're opening the doors to these things more cautiously, right? Because it's not like there's no risk here. It's so easy for a hallucination to find its way into a document, into a contract, into a relationship. I mean, some organizations, dollars are at stake. Some organizations, safety is at stake. Lives are at stake. Like, there's all these considerations about when and how you can bring a technology or something into the enterprise in a controlled way that doesn't create, that's okay. So I'm not surprised, and I'm not sure that I'm have a problem with the enterprise moving slower than the garage. I don't think that at these large enterprises, people are going to be able to innovate like you are in your garage. I just can't see that as a practical, path forward.
It's less about the innovation is really important. I think you made a really good point, Conrad. But just as you were saying that, I'm saying, look, you don't strip away the accountability. So if you're building agents that are going to do, something material for the business, something that exposes the business to a lot of risk, then yeah, that's I think a high risk type of use case. But let's talk about people using AI in their day-to-day role, for example, and you can stay accountable for your outputs. You use Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel today, right? And some people use those tools better than other people use those tools. But ultimately, your outputs are yours. So when you show something in PowerPoint or in Excel or in Word, if you're building a model in Excel, let's say, and you present it to the CFO, it's the expectation is that you own that model, right? That yes, you've built this, you own it. And I think keep that same kind of accountability, keep that same kind of expectation, but let people do what they must to do the best job they can, because these tools are amazing. Right? It's just you're holding yourself back otherwise. But I agree, there's probably a layer of this conversation, which is, hey, we're going to use an agent in a process, and nobody really, is going to be watching that closely. No one's going to be accountable. No one's going to be reviewing the outputs. Maybe that's where the crux of it is. Maybe that's what people need to solve for.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I mean, you could be in Word and do sort of a find and replace in a document, and, you should still read the document, right? Before you put, ink to paper and kind of sign off on it, even though you're kind of trusting this automation thing is going to work, and it generally does, but there's always little hiccups along the way. Natasha, this idea of having, and I'm going to use the word bleeding edge, Zach, just to like make my point a little stronger. But bleeding edge AI tools in the enterprise, I think what I'm hearing from Zach is there's a big pro there in terms of learning and understanding and pushing the boundaries about what we might be able to do with AI. And then there's this other question of governance and, safety and risk and everything else that, frankly, not every user in the enterprise really understands. I think that every day there's people that think AI just works, it's just magic, and they don't understand that even as it's gotten smarter, it still does dumb stuff. What do you think, Natasha? You ready to cut loose? I mean, you're working with some large enterprises. Are they ready to cut loose and just let everybody like get outside the fence that probably IT has put in place? Like there are rules in most organizations. You have to use Copilot, or you have to use this, or you have to use that. You can't use other stuff.
Yes, there are rules, and I even see how, like, I think building agents without strategy makes no sense. I mean, unless you're doing it for your own kind of like convenience, right? So I have multiple clients, I have multiple calendars. I cannot manage this multiple calendars. I need to build an agent that will be managing these calendars and kind of like unify in one calendar. That I'm doing it, like me building that does not compromise or contradict intention of any enterprise. But I see companies building agents, investing a lot of money and a lot of time, whether they do it themselves, but they're paying for the platform, or they're paying someone to build agents for them. And they just kind of like, it's like two agents dropped in the middle of the field, and they do something that has no connection to the entire operation. It's kind of like it's cool, it's sexy, it's slick, it's fun. It's like a toy, but it's a toy. It does not provide holistic solutions. So, Conrad, do you remember like when it's probably about a year ago, we had Dr. Eloise Epstein at Proc-N-Roll, and she said, maybe she didn't say it during the episode, but she said it to me on some other occasion, that if by the end of 2026 you're coming to work and you're not turning on 12 agents, you're not doing your work well. Like, you're behind. And I'm just thinking that maybe the goal, and as always, like, she is a great futurist, so she saw how quickly it's coming. Because I'm sure that by the end of the year, Zach will have 12 agents that he will be turning on every day. But I am thinking that maybe it's not the number of agents, but it's the connectivity of what they're trying to solve. So I'm going back to like, no, nobody's ready to cut it loose. And I am still of a belief that strategy should come first.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because what we talked about with agents a year ago is very different than what we're talking about with agents now. I mean, it almost feels like a completely different species, right? like,
well, but I agree with Natasha, Conrad, though, because maybe I think I'm converging on two things here. So one is you using AI in your day-to-day, and I don't know what Dr. Eloise Epstein meant by you need to have 12 agents, but if it means you need to set up 12 prompts that really help you do your job better. It's, for example, your job is sourcing and you create a prompt for researching suppliers. You could just tell it any category. It'll go help you do a search on suppliers, or a prompt for creating an RFP document where you give it your template and you tell it, here's how I want you to create these documents to save you, hours of writing them yourself or whatever. I think that layer is pretty safe. And that layer, it's pretty easy to keep someone accountable for the AI that they're using. But the thing that Natasha's talking about is where you have agents executing on a platform or a process, in which case I would totally agree, Natasha, that if you have a P2P platform, you can't have one P2P manager create an agent and another P2P manager create an agent that does something similar, but they're not exactly the same. That would be a disaster, right? So maybe AI, I guess AI just works at all the levels. So there's the level of personal productivity, right, which is you using it yourself, etc. But then there's the level of we want to embed agents in our operating model, and for that you definitely want some more governance. You need rules. You need ways that people can actually watch these agents and control them and make sure they're not duplicating them, etc. And you got to remember as well, like, people are going to build agents on all the different tools, and so how are agents going to talk to each other and how they pass data to each other, etc. So there's maybe two layers here that we need to consider.
I want to just I want to say I believe that at least half probably of Eloise messages get off the back row and start figuring this stuff out. I mean, 12 versus 8 versus 6 versus 3. Like, I don't think that, I mean, Eloise sees this coming and she's like, you've got to go do this. You've got to figure it out. This is the same message we've been telling. Like, we keep talking about it. We keep saying how simple it is. You got to go figure it out. I personally sort of finally bit the bullet. Last year, I tried to do the vibe coding agent kind of thing that Zach was doing. I struggled with that. With the new agents, I'm not struggling like I was last summer. So I'm able to, yesterday, in fact, my agent went out and looked at some HR processes that had been neglected in our business. It found the managers that were neglecting them. It said that manager and me had combined Slack message and said, hey, this stuff's late. You've got to get it done. This morning, it's all done. Right? They're reporting back to this this like 3-person Slack channel saying, okay, it's done. I've got it finished. Like, that's pretty freaking cool. But that's just this little nuance. And I am using technology that is not available to most people in the enterprise, right? Like, I'm on one of these open claw, like probably very, very unlikely, somebody in the enterprise can just go turn this on their work computer and start using it in the enterprise. But there's other tools out there. I mean, we came into this conversation like, who should own this thing? And, there's this, is there a central owner? Is it decentralized? How much of it lies on me as an individual versus my leaders to kind of start saying what I should or shouldn't do? I want to kind of go through a couple of angles of this, right? Like, as I've been playing with these agents, it's easy to burn through. I mean, if you're really cranking on something, you could burn $50 to $100 a day in AI, consumption. And I'm thinking about how many times when I've been living in procurement, hey, I need to travel to go see a supplier. I need to do this thing. Like, all of a sudden I'm expensing $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 or $600 a month on this AI token, API that I'm using. This is not trivial, right? One of you brought up, who's going to manage the budget and allocate the budget? Zach, I think you said that. Like, part of me is like, if this isn't creating efficiency and headcount reductions, like, AI should pay for itself, I think, right? At least once we get going here. But how do you deal? How do you deal with it in the meantime, right? How do you get through finance is going to want some control over all of this new spend that's coming in. And on the functional side, the function's going to want to be pushing this boundary. So there's so many aspects of ownership.
How do you fund innovation? It's innovation, so it's a shot in the dark by definition, right? Like, how much do you want to spend on innovation? Because you're absolutely right. The single biggest expense line in every single company right now around the world is token consumption and AI token cost, right? And I'm sort of extrapolating it, but I'm pretty certain it's going to be one of the biggest by far. Yeah, it's an emerging category. As Jason Bush had a great article on this 2 weeks ago, by the way, which I totally suggest checking out. But as usual, procurement feels like it's asleep at the wheel, right? Like, the people who are monitoring consumption and usage are in tech, obviously, because they own the tool. But procurement should be all over the costs, right? And because it's sort of parallel to software asset management in a lot of companies. You know how sometimes tech teams, they have like a SAM team that actually maintain all the different software, make sure there's no duplication, make sure they're paying for licenses that are being used, etc. That's also good category management and procurement. And so again, it's another kind of parallel with that, where I think procurement really needs to step up and control those costs a bit more and get better deals, negotiate better deals.
This is so much like at Adobe, Zach. There was, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 AWS like accounts and contracts and payments going out. So it's same thing happened in cloud, right? All the engineers were like, give me a cloud account, do this. And as such a decentralization of that category or that spend, it was wild. When we were talking with the AWS team from a procurement perspective, and it was one of my team members that was doing this, so please don't give me the credit for this. AWS was like, if you can consolidate those 3,000 accounts down to 1 or 2 enterprise accounts, we can give you like a 30 to 40% discount. This is on hundreds of millions of dollars of spend. We can give you a 30% discount. It was amazing. But I still think that there's the chaos in the beginning of a new technology and everyone doing it. But we couldn't, at procurement, we couldn't just go drive that account consolidation. We had to go secure alignment for that with the engineering and technology teams to basically say, look, this is the amount of money that's at stake if we continue to operate as we are, versus you guys make a leadership decision that drives this down through your organizations, that you don't just get to set up these things anymore and they're all going to roll together.
Yeah. Zach, can you can you share more color, extrapolate further on your statement that this tokens will be one of the biggest lines in the budget? Which tokens, when, like, how used, like, just more.
I am sort of sorry. This isn't like I probably made a statement as research based, yeah, but I'm pretty certain that if you go out there, I'll be validated. So when I say token usage, it's basically across the whole enterprise, right? So take, for example, companies releasing Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. That's like one of the most common things now. Everyone's got agents that sit in Teams, or not agents, but note takers in Teams. People are using Copilot. That on itself, every time someone prompts Copilot, every time a note is taken, every time a single word, or in some cases half of a word, shows up on a Teams that's generated by AI, that is a token that's been consumed, right? And you gotta think of token costs. They can be very expensive. And right now, if you look at consumer products, like if you look at ChatGPT that we use and the Claude that we use in our personal lives, etc., those are subsidized heavily by the model providers. But the API costs for businesses is not subsidized. There is a nice margin for the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI and providing those kinds of subscriptions. So when you take into account all the generic copilots, all of the AI that's being rolled out within existing enterprise tools, then you layer on top of that any sort of technology, any sort of coding that's going on. That's the entire coding team has now shifted coding to AI. I don't think anyone is still coding by hand anymore. So that's like a sticky cost that's going to be permanent. And then you think about all the individual tools that different teams and functions want to buy. Marketing wants to generate videos. Procurement wants to build agents to process this and that. Like, that is all token costs. And one thing I've seen that's that I'm not sure, like, this is gonna land, but some vendors are packaging up tokens and calling it something else so that they can sort of sell it as your consumption of my version of what a token is, basically, right? And there's not so much granular, like, insight into what exactly, how many tokens is that. Like, they're not talking about tokens, but the fact of the matter is the token is a very, very measurable data point, right? And if you go to any of those vendors,
well, I'll have to go get some data, I think, to back up what Zach's saying. But I've been listening to some podcasts talking about engineers that are like, if this engineer isn't spending $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 a year on tokens, then they're not doing their job, because they should be doing the work of, like, 5 or 6 engineers. Like, that's, like, people are saying that, right? But I think that there's, like, my head of engineering, we're having this conversation with him as well. Like, is that a reality thing? It's not a reality thing in how we're working today, but an engineer can spin up all of these things at the same time, and it can get very expensive. That's my main point. And so let's come back up to, like, the 50,000 foot level and say owning it in the organization is also there's a finance question here. Who's going to budget? Who's going to pay for it? What's going to be okay? There is a technology question, like what's okay to use. Can you use OpenAI? Do you have to stick with Microsoft or Microsoft's version of? They've got a version of OpenAI kind of running, right? Can you use Gemini? Can you use Claude, which has got so much momentum right now? Perplexity has come back to the front row of the conversation with their computer agent harness. Like, there's so many options here, and I think there are people that are going rogue in the enterprise, but technology governance around what is okay, what is approved, finance governance around what can you spend as a minimum. And then there is this strategic question about where do we really, given those considerations, where do we want to put our investment? What's like, is it going to be peanut buttered across every human or every function in the organization? Or are these the priorities where the limited budget that we have and the focus needs to be on marketing, or it needs to be on product, or wherever it is? Who owns this? Like, it's a huge question, guys.
I think this conversation has been insightful for me. Here's where I'm at so far. Security, CISO. Security policy for AI, CISO. Cost, procurement. Okay. You can argue technology as well, but I think it should be procurement because procurement's got should have their eye on all the costs. Individual productivity tools and usage, like in terms of governance, the individual themselves and the outputs that they're producing themselves.
You mean you're saying quality? That's like the quality of the output. Is that what you're saying on the individual?
Yeah. Your response, like if you generate a document and you present that, that's on you. Like, what's in the document is all on you. And then agents, functions. So every function will have its own agents that need to be governed and not duplicated and controlled and monitored. The functional head and the senior leadership of each function should be accountable for governing that layer.
At a functional level, the policy and process, or the agent? Like if I'm a person, I can't implement an agent against a standard set.
Yeah. Policy and definitely process and policy, but not things like security policy. Like if CISO says you're not ever allowed to put this type of data in an AI tool, then functional leadership should just
you have to obey.
Yeah, exactly.
Zach, who should own AI policy?
In terms of security or something different?
You're talking about, you imagining a document, Natasha? Like there's a PDF somewhere that you have to read when you get hired to a company to learn what the policy is?
Yeah, the guideline to the organization, what they can and cannot do.
I would recommend companies focus on security and focus on like really important things. If they try and dictate to the business like bigger policies and want to go really deep into what you can and can't do, and how if you make a policy too big, then you're really gonna stifle innovation. Like you just gotta let people use the tools. Like not do anything stupid with the tools, not expose you to major security risk, but give them freedom to innovate, right? And also choose what tools they want to use as well.
But you do need to stipulate what those risks are. Like when you say that don't do stupid things, my definition of stupid things may be very different from someone who is in the workforce the first time.
Yeah, it's not easy, Natasha. Like, imagine the tool that already exists in your enterprise today. Okay, I'm just going to say Coupa. I'm just picking up company, all right, who rolled out Navi agents, right? The question becomes like, okay, Coupa have rolled out the agents, they've made them available. Should you be able to start using those agents straight away? I know that in a lot of my clients, they would be like, no, actually, we need to now run this through model risk and, a few other internal committees to approve that we can actually use the agents, even though we have security agreements, data agreements already in place, like our data is already on Coupa or whatever software. And for me, I'm asking myself, like, is that value adding? Is it actually protecting the organization by having them go through all these gates? Because these things can take months, right? And how much value are they really adding? I mean, you're convening so many people, you're completing documentation, you're explaining. It's like doing an assessment all over again of a tool that you already have in your stack. I don't have the right answer, but I do see it slows things down a lot. And in this world, how slow do you want to go? Not slow at all, right?
Okay, let's bring us next time for the next conversation. Let's bring a CISO and a CPO to debate this.
That's gonna be interesting. There's definitely this tops-down clarity, like who's going to have to talk to the customer or some legal issue, or to the street because all of a sudden there's an extra 2% of spend going on that nobody planned on. Like there's tops-down considerations here from what are we going to allow at a really umbrella level, but there's this whole bottoms-up innovation and creativity to take this technology and apply it and make it useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may have shared with you before that when I was in one of my previous companies, between 7 VPs, we couldn't determine who should own the travel policy. And everyone wanted to own travel policy. So because they felt that it's like something very Ooh, you get some perks. You can become like 360 on Delta or global services on United and like all those benefits. So 7 VPs went into the room and 7 of them wanted to own the policy. At the end of the meeting, we exited the room and none of us wanted to own the policy once we understood how absolutely incredibly complex it will be to monitor compliance in the environment where I work. So I think we have very similar situation with AI policy. I honestly think that like in a couple of months, a shoe will drop. That what's one company, one employee, someone who's sitting somewhere in the basement and just creating something on their own will absolutely unintentionally will spill some secrets, some data. It like it's already happening in small things, but we just didn't have like a big shoe drop with a lot of with a big ripple effect. I think it's coming. So I understand people don't like policies and people think like she's a boring procurement person who all she can think about is compliance. But I think that otherwise enterprise, it will be very expensive experience experimenting with new technology without having any sort of guardrails. While I am 100% with Zach that we should not kill creativity.
I've come to fear your predictions, Natasha, because they have a knack of coming true not too long after you said them.
Yeah, well, I'm not for anarchy, but I'm also not for wild west.
It is complicated because the kind of things that Zach is doing in his garage are learning and setting a standard and frankly, I think Zach even spilling influence back into the enterprise, because when somebody like you has so much passion and so much experience and realizes it's not as hard as everybody thinks, then the bottoms up pressure can be applied in the enterprise that says, hey, look, you've fenced me away from doing these kind of things, but look at what we could do if we would open up the fence a little bit. We could do these kinds of things. And without that bottoms up pressure, I think it's going to be a really slow process to get the level of innovation into AI and the enterprise that's truly possible. And it's a moving target. It's getting better and better and better every month. These new models that are coming out it's shocking, right? It seems like there was this big change over the winter in terms of how capable these models are. And now we're seeing whether it's marketing or reality around some of these new agents coming out of Claude and others that are like generationally better than the last ones. And the kind of improvements we're seeing are just stunning. It's so cool. So we're gonna follow up on a conversation. We'll bring some guests in. I'm not sure we're all aligned completely, other than the fact that it's complicated. There is a tops down element. There's a bottoms up element. Probably.
But I like how Zach separated it that that CISO should own security aspect of it. Procurement should own the cost of it, and either strategy or transformation or or tech should own the overall strategy, AI strategy. I think it's still not clear who should own the policy.
Well, you're going to put 7 people into a room and you're going to pass that hot potato around. I think in the start of this conversation, we said, well, it kind of sits in the office of the CEO. There's things like you're saying procurement should own the cost. And I think what you're saying is procurement should own optimizing around cost and value, because ultimately the CFO and the CEO need to say, how much are we willing to spend at a mega level on this innovation stuff, that Zach's talking about, that doesn't break the bank? Because I guarantee you, like, you get into these enterprises, even these enterprises that have said, hey, you can't use this tool in our enterprise. You go look at the credit card and the expense tool, you're going to find a whole bunch of shadow AI leakage that's going across the enterprise. Guaranteed that's happening. And if they can't do it on their if they can't do it on their work computer because it's just so locked down because of regulations and everything else, they're doing what Zach's doing. They have a digital twin that sits in a different piece of hardware, and they're kind of swivel chairing their way between the AI agent to do work where they can go do it over here, and then okay, I'm not restricted there, and I can come over here and do my regular enterprise job on my other computer.
I hope that people will be reprimanded for that, because this is how you can bring enterprise down. I would be writing a policy. I would say that you cannot do no, you cannot start creating digital twins. This is how you're going to create anarchy, like a full wild west. Not that. No, you cannot do that. But also, because like a good procurement person, good CPO, when they see some AI contracts, they will ask questions. What are you planning to retire? Like, if you're bringing this additional expense, what are you giving up? What is it replacing? You're bringing this in as a replacement of what? If this is all just going to piling up one thing on the top of another, then you're not taking full advantage of technology.
Well, the first generation is going to be interesting, because the way that people answer that question first is, I'm working 60 hours a week, so I'm taking away 10 of those hours or 20 of those hours. I'm in a COVID that piled up so many hours on top of everybody, and so many other, like the first wave of efficiency, it's going to be really hard to get rid of people in the enterprise because everybody is tapped. And they're looking for ways to better manage their meetings, to get better prepared, to better follow up, to get everything done. So I think it's going to be tricky in the first wave to get people to really put headcount on the line or other technology on the line or whatever it might be. But if you think about somebody who in sourcing doing a digital twin that realizes they can build an agent on, let's just say, Perplexity to do should cost analysis. For me to go, okay, I'm supposed to do this mobile phone contract on my enterprise life. I can go over here and ask some completely non-sensitive questions to my digital twin in Perplexity that might be disallowed for company confidential information. And it may save me 2 weeks of time, right? By having this other thing running.
Yeah, we're having to go from one, you have to key it in this computer, right, generically, and then you have to take it here and like make it for your company. Like, yeah, it's and that's kind of the friction, right? I think that's where we're talking about people want these tools, and us as procurement is about giving people what they want and doing it in a safe way, in a compliant way. I clearly agree, Natasha. So
we procurement people want to give these tools to people. We can't just give tools and say, do whatever you want with that.
Yeah.
We can't, I'm repeating myself. I'm all for creativity and freedom of expression within acceptable norms.
All right, everybody. This is awesome. Will be continued. We want to bring in a couple of experts in this space and get their perspective about how it sits. Natasha, I know you've got a bunch of CFO friends as well. This would be a really interesting one. The CISO, the CFO, CPOs, these are good questions for all of these people as we're talking to them to try and get some clarity on who. I think a good way to frame it is, like you said, who owns the policy, because there is the innovation question, there's the governance question, there's the enforcement question, there's the budget question. The policy should be able to wrap all of that up good enough that an average enterprise person should be able to understand what they can and can't do.
I think the companies who have strong cross-functional collaboration will do very well. And companies who operate in silos, they will struggle with this a lot.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Good to catch up. Have an amazing rest of your day. Zach, looking forward to seeing you in London here in a couple of weeks. We need to catch up on our workshop. And great. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Let's make this episode and others available to everybody. Love you all.